never thought I'd see his name again, especially not on a list of people drowning in debt. The man who once promised me forever, who shattered my heart like it meant nothing, was now begging banks for mercy. I stared at the article for hours, reading and rereading his name, my ex-husband, Adam Carter, the billionaire who had everything, until he didn't. I should have felt satisfaction. After all, he'd walked away from me like I was disposable, but instead there was a strange ache in my chest. Because once upon a time I'd loved that man more than life itself. Our marriage had been a fairy tale, or at least that's what everyone thought. He was the rising star of the tech world, and I was the quiet designer who believed in him before anyone else did. Together we built everything from nothing, but as success came, so did secrets. I still remember the night it all fell apart, the argument, his cold voice saying, "You're just jealous, Claire. You can't stand that I don't need you anymore." I walked out with nothing but my pride. It took me years to rebuild myself, to create my own company, to prove I didn't need him either. But that night, sitting in my penthouse with the city lights flickering below, I saw something in that article that no one else did. A man completely broken. The Adam I knew had been proud, arrogant even, but never helpless. Something in me couldn't let it go. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe love doesn't just disappear, no matter how much pain it carries. I told myself it would be simple, a quiet act of kindness he'd never know about, just enough to lift him out of the mess. I called my lawyer the next morning, my voice steady but my hands trembling. "Find out how much he owes," I said, "and pay it, anonymously." The lawyer hesitated, but I didn't. I convinced myself it was closure, that I'd finally be free once I helped him. But as I signed those documents, as millions left my account under a fake trust name, I had no idea that the secret I thought would bring me peace would soon bring me face to face with the past I'd tried so hard to forget. Weeks passed after I signed the papers, and I told myself to forget it. I tried to drown in work, late-night meetings, endless projects, anything that kept my mind off him. But the truth is, every night when I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the way he used to look at me when success was just a dream, when we'd sit on our tiny balcony and talk about building a life together. Back then, it wasn't about money or fame. It was about us. And now, it was as if all of that had been erased by greed and pride. My assistant, Julia, noticed my distraction one morning. "You okay, Claire? You've been off lately," she asked, her voice gentle. I forced a smile. "Just tired," I lied, but inside I was unraveling. Because I'd heard through quiet whispers that Adam's debts were suddenly gone, that someone had come forward and cleared everything. He was back in the media again. The miracle man who bounced back. Reporters were calling it luck. Others said it was investors. No one knew the truth, and that's how I wanted it. Or at least that's what I told myself. Then one afternoon, I saw a photo of him at a charity gala, smiling, champagne glass in hand, his arm around another woman. My stomach twisted. She was young, radiant, and her hand rested on his chest like she owned it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I told myself it didn't matter. I had no right to care. But deep down, it burned. I'd just paid off every debt he had, and there he was, living like the world had never broken him. Maybe that was my fault. I'd given him a second chance at the life he'd thrown away. That night, I sat by my window, watching rain streak down the glass, and whispered to myself, "Why did I do this?" The answer didn't come. Instead, something darker settled in me. I began to wonder what would happen if he ever found out it was me. Would he thank me, hate me, or worse, pity me? I didn't know, but I could feel something shifting in the air. A sense that the secret I thought was safe wasn't going to stay hidden for long. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind of night when the city hums with quiet chaos and my office lights were the last ones still on. Julia came in holding a thick white envelope. "This was delivered by hand," she said, placing it on my desk. My name was written across it in neat, familiar handwriting, his handwriting. My heartbeat quickened. I waited until Julia left before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, embossed with the logo of Adam's company, the one I'd helped him design years ago. I know it was you." Those 5 words were all it said. No greeting, no signature, but I didn't need one. My throat went dry, my hands shaking as I read it again and again. He knew. Somehow, despite every effort to stay invisible, he'd found out. I sat there, frozen, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and blue through my tears. For days I heard nothing more. No calls, no messages, just silence, the kind that gnaws at you from the inside. Then, one morning, as I walked into my building's lobby, I saw him. Adam. Standing there like a ghost pulled straight from my memories. He looked different, tired, older, but his eyes still carried that same sharpness that once made me fall for him. "Claire," he said softly. And just hearing my name from his mouth again felt like a wound reopening. "Can we talk?" I wanted to say no, to turn around and walk away, but something in his voice stopped me. We went up to the rooftop terrace where the wind cut through the silence between us. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why would you do that after everything I did to you?" His tone wasn't angry, just bewildered, almost fragile. I swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want to see you lose everything," I whispered. He let out a bitter laugh. "So you decided to play savior? Make yourself feel better by rescuing your ex-husband?" The words stung, but I stood my ground. "No, I just wanted peace." He looked at me for a long time, then stepped closer. "Peace? You think you can buy peace with money, Claire?" His voice hardened. "You didn't save me. You humiliated me." And before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart shattering all over again. I stood there on that cold rooftop long after he left, the wind biting at my face, his words echoing in my mind like cruel music. "You didn't save me. You humiliated me. I thought I was doing something kind. Something that would free both of us from the bitterness that had once poisoned everything between us. But instead it felt like I had reopened a wound that would never truly heal." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the look in his eyes, not anger exactly, but something worse. Pride. It had always been his greatest strength and his deepest flaw. He'd rather fall to pieces alone than accept help from the woman he believed he no longer needed. The next morning I told myself to move on, to forget him completely this time. But life has a way of testing you when you think you've closed a chapter for good. A few days later, I arrived at my office to find a bouquet of white lilies on my desk. No note, just the faint scent of regret. My heart tightened. I knew they were from him. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. I shouldn't have said what I did. "Can we meet? Just one last time." My first instinct was to delete it. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, won. We met at the old cafe we used to go to when we were broke and in love. The one with flickering lights and chipped tables. When I walked in, he was already there, looking smaller somehow, his arrogance replaced by something almost human. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly when I sat down. "I just didn't know how to handle it. Knowing that after everything you still cared enough to help me, it made me feel weak." I met his eyes. "It wasn't about you," I said. "It was about me. I needed to let go of the anger." For a long moment, we just sat there, two ghosts of who we used to be. Then he reached across the table and said softly, "You've always been better than me, Claire." His voice broke on my name. And I think that's what scared me the most. For a moment, the world around us seemed to stop. His hand lingered on the table between us, not quite touching mine, and I could see the storm of emotions flickering behind his eyes, regret, shame, maybe even love buried under layers of pride and mistakes. I wanted to believe that this conversation meant something, that maybe it was our long-awaited closure, but deep down, I knew better. Some wounds don't close neatly. They scar and throb whenever you touch them. I forced a small smile. "We were good once," I said softly. He nodded, his jaw tightening. "The best," he murmured. For a second, I saw the boy he once was, the dreamer who used to fix my coffee just the way I liked it, who stayed up all night working on prototypes while I sketched designs beside him. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had lost himself chasing power. "So what happens now?" he asked, voice low. I stared at him, searching for the right words. "Now, we move on. For real this time." He looked disappointed, maybe even hurt, but he didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You know," he said almost bitterly, "I used to think money could fix everything, that if I had enough of it, I'd never feel small again. But when I saw those debts disappear and realized it was you, it made me feel smaller than ever." His honesty caught me off guard. "Then maybe that's the lesson," I said quietly. "We can't buy peace. We can only earn it." For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of our shared past filling the air. When we finally stood, he gave me a look that felt like goodbye. "Take care of yourself, Claire," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You always deserved better than me." And just like that, he was gone. I watched him disappear into the rain, his figure fading into the crowd, and something inside me finally let go. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was freedom. As I walked back to my car, I realized that sometimes helping someone isn't about being thanked or understood. It's about proving to yourself that you've grown past the pain. And for the first time in years, I felt light again. But peace never lasts long, does it? Just when I thought I could finally breathe again, the universe decided to test me once more. 2 weeks after that cafe meeting, my company received a mysterious investment offer, an anonymous fund, wanting to pour millions into my next design project. It should have been good news, but something about it felt off. The timing, the way the documents arrived without explanation, the familiar phrasing in the attached letter, it all made my skin prickle. I asked my lawyer to trace it, and when he called back later that night, his tone said it all before the words left his mouth. "Claire, it's from Adam." My heart sank. After everything he was trying to repay me, I stared at the signed forms on my desk, my fingers trembling. A quiet war raged inside me. Part of me wanted to accept it, to believe it was his way of saying thank you, that maybe we'd both found closure. But another part, the stronger part, knew it wasn't gratitude driving him. It was guilt. And guilt wasn't love. It wasn't peace. The next morning I went straight to his office, something I swore I'd never do again. His secretary looked startled when I walked in unannounced, but I didn't stop. Adam was there, sitting behind the same glass desk I'd helped him buy years ago when his company was just starting out. He looked surprised, but not shocked, almost like he'd been expecting me. "You found out," he said simply. I threw the envelope onto his desk. "What is this? Some kind of repayment plan? A way to even the score?" He met my eyes, calm but tired. "No, it's a way to give something back. You helped me when I didn't deserve it. I'm just trying to make things right." I shook my head, tears burning in my eyes. "You still don't get it, do you? I didn't do it for you to owe me. I did it so we could both move on." His jaw tightened, frustration flashing across his face. "Then let me do the same," he said, voice rising. "Let me move on my way." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just two people trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed, standing in the ruins of what used to be love. I don't know what I expected him to say next. Maybe an apology or another bitter remark, but instead, he just looked at me with that haunted expression that used to appear in the rare moments when he let his guard down. "You know," he said slowly, "when I lost everything, I thought it was karma. For how I treated you, for letting my ego destroy the one person who actually cared." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a fleeting second, I saw the vulnerability he worked so hard to hide. "Adam," I said quietly, "you don't owe me redemption. You just owe it to yourself to be better." He looked away, his eyes glistening with something like shame. "That's what I'm trying to do," he murmured. "Investing in your project. It's not about money, it's about believing in something pure again." His words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to be angry, to push him away again, but I couldn't. because beneath all the mistakes and pride, there was still a part of him that I recognized the man I once built dreams with. I sat down across from him, the tension in the room so thick it was almost suffocating. "If you really want to make things right," I said, steadying my voice, "then stop trying to buy forgiveness. Just live differently." He gave a small broken smile. "You always were the moral compass between us." I laughed bitterly. "And you were the storm." For a long moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with everything left unsaid. Then he reached into his drawer and pulled out a worn, faded sketchbook, the one I thought I'd lost years ago. "I kept this," he said, sliding it toward me. "I couldn't throw it away. It reminded me of who we were before everything went wrong." My fingers brushed the cover, and memories flooded back late nights, laughter, whispered dreams. My throat tightened. "You should have told me," I whispered. "Maybe if we had just talked." He shook his head gently. "We weren't those people anymore." And he was right. The realization hurt more than I wanted to admit. As I stood to leave, he said softly, "I hope someday you'll see me as more than the man who broke you." I didn't turn around. "I already do," I said, and walked out. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city glowing beneath me like a restless sea of memories. The sketchbook lay open on my coffee table, its pages filled with the echoes of a life I'd once dreamed of. Drawings of our first product ideas, notes scrawled in the margins, and little doodles he'd added when he thought I wasn't looking. I traced the lines of one sketch, my fingers trembling. It was us drawn years ago. Two figures standing side by side, holding hands under a rising sun. A lump formed in my throat. We'd really believed we could conquer the world together. I poured myself a glass of wine, but it did nothing to quiet the ache. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Adam. "Thank you for meeting me today. I won't bother you again. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of who you became." I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down without replying. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. His company slowly recovered, not through flashy deals or borrowed money, but through smaller, steadier projects. I'd see articles about his quiet philanthropy, about the way he started mentoring young entrepreneurs. He'd disappeared from the spotlight that once defined him. Maybe he'd finally learned humility. Meanwhile, my own business flourished in ways I'd never imagined. Yet, every now and then, when success came knocking, I'd think of him not with anger or longing, but with a strange kind of peace. We'd both survived each other. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten and unsigned, but I knew instantly who it was from. "You were right. Money doesn't buy peace, but forgiveness does. I hope you found both." I smiled through tears I didn't know were coming. For the first time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something you give to others. It's something you give to yourself when you stop carrying the weight of what broke you. I closed the letter and placed it inside the sketchbook, between the pages of our beginnings. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt complete. Months passed, and life began to feel strangely calm. Almost too calm, like the silence after a long storm. My company had just launched a new line, and I was preparing for an international expansion when I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, formal yet hesitant, introduced himself as Adam's attorney. My heart skipped a beat before he even said the next words. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Carter passed away last night." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin, my vision blurring as his words echoed through me like a dull, heavy bell. What?" I whispered. "It was sudden," the lawyer continued gently. "A cardiac arrest. He was alone at his home." I sat there in silence, gripping the edge of my desk, 1,000 emotions flooding through me: shock, sadness, disbelief, and a quiet kind of sorrow that felt almost unfair. I had just started to let go, to believe the past was truly behind us, and now it was gone for good. The lawyer went on to say that Adam had left behind a will, and I had been mentioned in it. Days later, I found myself sitting in his office again, this time surrounded by legal documents and the faint smell of his cologne that still lingered in the air. The lawyer handed me a sealed envelope with my name written on it, in that same neat handwriting I knew too well. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Claire, I don't know if this will ever reach you, but if it does, I want you to know I finally understood. You didn't save me to fix me, you saved me to remind me I still had something good inside. You were the only thing I ever got right, even if I ruined it. I'm leaving you something not out of guilt, but gratitude. Use it to keep creating beauty in a world I often made ugly." Along with the letter was a legal document transferring ownership of his old company's design division to me. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there staring at the paper, realizing that this final gesture was his way of saying goodbye. I walked out of that office clutching the envelope as if it were made of glass, fragile and sacred all at once. The city around me buzzed with life-honking cars, distant chatter, the rhythm of people rushing somewhere, but I felt detached, as if I were moving through a memory. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the first drops of rain began to fall as I stood outside the building that once bore his name. The letters on the sign had faded slightly over time, and for a moment, I imagined him there again, confident, stubborn, brilliant, and flawed. I whispered his name under my breath, not in anger or grief, but in quiet acceptance. "Goodbye, Adam." That night I returned home and opened the sketchbook once more. I slipped his final letter between the pages, right beside the old drawings of our dreams. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights into streaks of gold and silver. For years I'd carried the weight of what we'd lost, believing that closure would come from an apology, a confession, something tangible. But now I understood it came from the silence that followed forgiveness, from the peace that blooms when you stop expecting the past to make sense. His final gift wasn't the company or the money. It was the understanding that love doesn't always last, but it leaves something behind: strength, compassion, wisdom. I decided to reopen the design division he left me, not under his name, but under mine, dedicating it to artists and dreamers who had once lost their way, but found light again. When the launch day came months later, I stood on the stage, looking at the logo shining behind me, a phoenix rising from the ashes, and I smiled. In the audience, I imagined him there, watching quietly, maybe even proud. "This," I said into the microphone, "is for anyone who has ever loved, lost, and learned that sometimes the most powerful act of love is letting go." The applause echoed through the hall, and in that moment, I felt truly free. The story of Adam and me wasn't one of tragedy anymore. It was one of transformation, of endings that became beginnings.